was walking with my donkey searching for you.
I won't be tamed. Okay. I'm a clinical psychologist in private practice in San Diego, and my specialty is working with trauma and PTSD. And I'm also owned by some donkeys. And when Eric asked me if I might be interested in talking more about this topic, I didn't really know much about hoarding. Yes, I'll bring it closer to my mouth. But as I started doing research, and I've been researching this topic over the past couple months, what I discovered is that trauma is really at the root of all of these hoarding disorders. And I thought, well, this is a perfect fit for me. And it really occurred to me that most psychologists don't have this information, that they might be a perfect fit for treating hoarding disorder. Because if you would have asked me a year ago to see somebody suffering from hoarding disorder, I would have said, no, thank you, that's outside my area of expertise. Well, it turns out it's not. I also started becoming interested in donkeys about 5 years ago. I was living on a ranch, and I would say I was more donkey curious, and came to the Donkey Welfare Symposium, and then that happened. Yeah, so that's my heart donkey, Carlito, on the left. I worked with him during Ben's training clinic, and then I was like, well, I'm not leaving him here. And of course, you can't just leave with one donkey. It's against the rules. So that's Cindy Donkey on the right. She's got a first and last name Donkey. And she was named after Cindy Davis, because they were so kind to foster them for a couple weeks while I got myself in order. Because, you know, as a new donkey owner, you don't know what you don't know. You think, how hard can it be? Pack them up, send them home. But it turns out there's a lot to learn. And I'm sure a lot of you can empathize with that here. So just have to say too, and that happened. I saw that face. That's Sarah's fault. Is Sarah in here? Hi, Sarah. Yeah, Sarah posted that on the Facebook page for the little Ione local rescue. And then, I mean, how can you say no to that face? He's so good. And he turned out to be the therapy donkey for the other two minis, because they were so surly. So, Winston has been the therapy donkey. And I have to say what a joy it is to be with a group of people that I don't have to explain. You get that look of like, oh, I've got donkeys, and people go, what? So it's so nice to not have to do that here, and we can just jump into all the craziness together. Because I am a trauma therapist, this is a trauma-informed lecture, so I just want to tell you up front, there's not going to be any shocking graphic photos, and I've done my best to minimize the language that's really sensationalized. I know the news loves to use language that's really shocking and horrifying, and I've really tried to minimize that where possible, just because your nervous systems don't need that hit. And also because I am a trauma therapist, we're gonna do this a trauma-informed way. So I'd just like you to look around the room. I know it's not polite to look at each other, but we're gonna break the rules here. So turn around, make eye contact with people sitting around you. Maybe you wanna offer a smile or a wave. Just see who's sitting in the room. Okay, that's nice, right? Like, this is our community. And so I don't wanna jump ahead too far, but if we're gonna make changes with this, let's start here with the community of the Donkey Welfare Symposium. We're about 200 that are here this weekend. And sometimes when we think about hoarding, it's such a big problem that it's easy to get overwhelmed with it. So I'm gonna suggest that we bring it close in to our tribe here, to our family, and try to talk about this and make it an open discussion, because there's a lot of shame involved when somebody gets into a situation when they're in too deep. And there's different categories of hoarders, and we're going to get into that. But generally, the people here might be in this room are going to be people that need a hand, people that might be a little embarrassed to discuss what's really happening at home. Hoarding doesn't discriminate. We see it across genders, race, ethnicities, socioeconomic status, professions, and the thing about it is it's done in secret. So usually hoarders are not coming to therapy saying, I'm a hoarder. Usually they're motivated by some other force, either friends, family, or law enforcement. We're going to be talking about the case in Olancha, California. And I'd really like to preface this with saying let's try to treat this case with sensitivity. I've seen a lot of comments on Facebook and other things. It's kind of like an off with their head mentality. And whereas what happens to the animals when they're hoarded is heinous, it's terrible, and we're their guardian protectors, and we feel compelled to do better for them, and we should. If we get judgy and we start pointing fingers and this should happen and that should happen, then we close our minds, and when we close our minds, we can't learn anything new. And what I've learned from the research is that we're not doing so well when it comes to addressing animal hoarding. We have to do better. So hopefully we can open our minds and learn together. So our objectives, you're going to get all the statistics and this and that and talk about animal hoarding. And again, using the seizure of over 160 animals in Alancia this past March. Very recent case, that's why it's on our minds. So let's start with the good, because this starts off really, really noble. So Diana and Jean Chantos in 1984 gained their nonprofit status in 1992. They started the Wild Burro Rescue. They love burros, just like everybody in this room, so we're the same. They adopted 4 burros from Death Valley National Park, and they were slated to be put down, so they saved these burros. And as they had these burros in their home and they worked with them, they just absolutely fell in love with them and saw how magical they were, just like many of you have done too. And they really wanted to educate people about how fantastic and useful and funny and quirky and silly and magical these beings were. So here's a quote from Diana. "We had a dream to walk away into the mountains and not return. We would travel with our burros, and people would be able to see what wonderful animals these wild ones are. We could educate people about the issues and prove to many that wild burros should never be shot." I mean, who can't get on board with that? It's so noble. So they planned their 2-year trek with their burros, and during that time, they participated in a Mustang rescue. So these were very active animal advocates. During that rescue, they learned of a herd of 120 wild burros that were awaiting elimination. And so they decided that that couldn't happen. So they ended their trek, they changed their dream, and they moved the 120 burros to their ranch in Washington. In 1994, the California Desert Protection Act transferred tens of thousands of acres from BLM, where the donkeys were safe, to the National Park Service. They were labeled as an alien species, even though they'd been there for over 300 years, and their fate was direct reduction, so they were going to shoot them. So the Wild Burro Rescue prevented this by negotiating a deal with national parks that they would take a certain number of animals off their land every year, and they wouldn't shoot them. So they had that agreement for quite a while until Mark Myers from PVDR took it over. Okay, here's the slippery slope. So things are going swimmingly. They've got these burros. Diana's husband, Gene, did the fundraising for the rescue. He did the paperwork, the bookkeeping, and he was a farrier. So he was taking care of their hooves. Unfortunately, they were divorced. Gene passed from pancreatic cancer, and Diana moved to Alancia, California with her burros. She moved to a location that's, as I understand it, about 2 hours away from civilization. Limited electricity, she had solar power, no refrigeration, no running water. They did have some water from the mountain runoff, and there was a kind-hearted person that ran the RV park nearby that let them take water from the showers. And a drunk volunteer wrecked their main water storage. So it was kind of an exchange with homeless individuals to provide some care at the ranch, which wasn't going so well. They had a GoFundMe campaign, and they raised $16,000 over 44 months. So that's a couple $100 a month when you break that down. And complaints were made to animal control for the past 15 years. And when I talked to Mark Myers, he had been hearing about these complaints and people calling him of, do something. And he had reached out for help and was smacked down. She didn't want his help. And people say, well, why didn't animal control do something? Well, Inyo County is vast, and the resources are slim. And when they had a new animal county control supervisor come in, Julie Richardson, and I call her a saint, and she thinks I'm a weirdo, but she really is a saint. She took it upon herself to go out there and check it out. And, you know, just one act of, I guess that was in her job description, but to come in and really act on that, because when she allocated her resources to go check out that rescue, she had to take them away from other animals, so that's a tough decision. But she did go out there. And that's where we ended up in March 2019. Diana was charged with 9 counts of felony animal abuse. There was 1 for each animal that was euthanized, 7 burros were euthanized, and 2 general counts because they were in such deplorable condition. There were over 160 animals seized, 150 donkeys, a cow, a dog, 9 horses, and 7 mules. Just to let you rest easily, they're all being cared for now. Some of them have been adopted out, the cow, the dog, horses, and the donkeys are being held in a undisclosed location to keep them safe, but they're doing well. So using this case, we're going to keep coming back to this, but I just wanted you to have the general facts about this case, and we'll see kind of how this slippery slope developed. Another thing that you need to know about is the Hoarding of Animals Research Consortium. If you want to know anything about animal hoarding, this is your go-to place. They have done a phenomenal job from 97 to 2006 doing research and finally publishing a community intervention manual, which is really easy to read, easy to follow. And I love their mission because they're looking to find more compassionate and effective solutions. They're not just into prosecution. They want to really understand what's going on. And their work continues through Dr. Gary Petronik and Jane Nathanson. So I have a citation there. It's in my resources section, and I think, Eric, they can have the slides and everything afterwards. Yeah. So in the resources section, it's definitely there, but really anything you want to know is in that manual. And I'll refer to them as HARC from here on forward. So how is animal hoarding defined? So we didn't even really hear about animal hoarding. That wasn't described until 1981. And we didn't have anything published in the literature till 1999. So that's fairly recent. And this is HARC's definition. And if you read nothing else, just read the stuff in red. So having more than the typical number of companion animals, I know that probably doesn't rule out most of us in here. No judgment. But here's the important part. Failing to provide even minimal standards of nutrition, sanitation, shelter, and veterinary care. And then this neglect resulting in suffering. Also a denial of the inability to provide this care. So it would be a very different thing if you come up to your neighbor and say, gosh, it looks like you're having a hard time, and they say, you know what, I have been, you know, I need to get these animals care. Is very different than somebody that says, no, oh, they're fine, they're a little long, I'm gonna get them trimmed next week. It's a very different case. And then the persistence despite this failure in accumulating and controlling animals. So things are already out of control, but they keep taking more and more on. This is hoarding disorder as defined by our Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. I feel like I want a Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. That's my nerd voice. The DSM-5, and that's what mental health professionals use to diagnose disorders. This was not even included in the DSM until 2013. And this is for all hoarding. So not really everything applies here, but again, look for the stuff in red. The hoarding causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. And usually in these hoarding cases, the tough ones, it's not really causing distress. That's why we're not seeing them in therapy, because the person is just kind of single focused on they're helping the animals. So they're not feeling a lot of cognitive dissonance about that. They do list a little blurb in our DSM about animal hoarding in particular, and animal hoarding is very different than hoarding of objects. So again, accumulation of a large number of animals, failure to provide care, unsanitary conditions, and poor insight in animal hoarding. The poor insight, it really is the tough part. We've classified this under obsessive compulsive disorder in our DSM, but it's really, animal hoarding is really nothing like OCD. In OCD, people usually have some awareness of like, oh gosh, I hate this, but I can't stop myself from doing it. Also, with OCD, there's usually not the unsanitary conditions. Usually it goes to the other side where people are hyper-sanitary. So what's the difference between hoarding and just having a large number of animals? In case you're getting nervous here. So it's the impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning, including maintaining a safe environment for self and others. And that's kind of unequivocal. You know, if a room of us were looking at a case, we could all probably agree that somebody was having impairment, even if they couldn't see it themselves. And the other one, failure to provide minimal standards of care. And so that's another big thing. So you can have a lot of animals, but if you're taking care of them, then you're in the clear. Let me see. For the most part, right? Let me make sure I'm not leaving anything out here. Right. And denial of this inability to provide care. So, you know, you just your animals are living in squalor and you're saying, oh, it's not so bad. And this reaches delusional levels of denial. What's the difference between animal hoarding and other animal cruelty? Because they're all kind of lumped together when it comes to the law. The suffering arises from chronic neglect. These aren't people that are going out and beating their animals, they're not whipping their animals, it's just they are not caring for them in the way that they need to be cared for. And the other thing is the perpetrator of hoarding generally does not intend to harm the animals. So, differential diagnosis, things that have been misdiagnosed for hoarding or that kind of go along with hoarding. The ones that are comorbid, that are co-occurring with hoarding, quite often are in red. But the other things are brain injury, neurodevelopmental disorders, neurocognitive disorders, schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder. I put that because they listed it, but I'm not really buying it. And then co-occurring, we see a lot of substance abuse, major depressive disorder, and up to 80% of cases there's a co-occurring mood disorder, social or generalized anxiety disorder, personality disorders, and trauma. You guys all know what a personality disorder is? Yeah? So if you don't, it's a maladaptive way of interacting with the environment. It's fairly stable over time. It arises from trauma, and it's kind of characterized by really chaotic, unstable relationships in your life. So, the people that are always in the drama, they might have a personality disorder. Not diagnosing anyone. So I'm really proud of myself that I made this graphic, because I'm not good at PowerPoint at all. But here's animal hoarding, and there's trauma all around. The trauma in red is all around. And then the things that really are close to hoarding, there's a familial component. 50% of people that are hoarders have a family member that is also a hoarder. Depression, anxiety, substance abuse, attachment issues, personality disorders, those are all really closely related. And then other things that are related but not as strongly, they're in the purple. So there are other things that occur with animal hoarding. I cannot take credit for this. This is from HARC. But I really like the way they think about the genesis of how people get started animal hoarding. They think it has to do with attachment and turn to animals. And yes, I'm guilty of that too. Or I don't even want to use the word guilty because it's not a bad thing. They provide us that unconditional emotional support. And it's a beautiful reciprocal relationship. So if you're using animals as your only source of support, you start down that slippery slope. So if we just follow it along here, and you start losing touch with humans a little bit more and more, compulsive, excessive caregiving of animals, heightened sense of identity, self-esteem, and control. Oh, you're a saint. Oh my gosh, what you've done for those animals. Oh, they need you. Oh, you saved them. So we get self-esteem from that. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if you're helping out animals, yeah, you should feel good about that. But then there's a triggering event, a crisis, a trauma, and it overwhelms our ability to cope. So that could even be a serious illness that happens. And suddenly, the resources that you had in place aren't there anymore. And when your caregiving capacity is exceeded, you're not able to meet the animal's needs anymore. And you kind of check out. So animal neglect, self-neglect. Where it says dissociation here, there's a big shame component to this. So if you've been taking in animals or rescuing animals and all of a sudden you're not able to do that anymore, shame has the effect of kind of numbing out our nervous system. We kind of dissociate a little bit when it comes to shame because it's just so hard to take in and we're not really able to perceive our environment correctly. The hoarding statistics, now this is for hoarding, all hoarding, not just animal hoarding, but all hoarding is 2 to 6% of the population. So if our group here is a representative sample at the Donkey Welfare Symposium, that means about 10 people out of the group would meet criteria for hoarding if we were a representative sample, which I don't know if we are. We have some idea of what the typical animal hoarder would look like, and that's a female on the second half of life, so 50 and older, and single, widowed, or divorced. And that's a stereotype, but we see it so often in the clinical samples that I know. It doesn't mean that you're a hoarder. I'm not profiling. I'm not profiling. But usually the symptoms have shown up somewhere, and this again is for hoarding disorder. This is for a diagnosable psychological event. So not just you have some characteristics. That's one thing, like when you go through school as a psychologist and you start reading this big book, you're like, oh my God, I have schizophrenia. Oh, I have hoarding disorder. I have this. Like you think you have everything. I think it's the same with medical school too. Those of you that have gone to medical school, you think you have everything. But the symptoms usually emerge in your early teens and they only get worse. So if you were starting to collect items, then it gets worse. If you're starting to collect animals, we see it only gets worse. We're not seeing it get better. And once it begins, it's almost always chronic. And the recidivism is nearly 100%. The prognosis is poor. And the reason for that is the really low insight that people have regarding their disorder. Prominent features, so like I said, 50% of people usually have a relative that also has issues with hoarding. Stressful or traumatic life events can be a precipitant, so pushing people away from other people and kind of into their own worlds. Indecisiveness is another hallmark feature of people that have hoarding disorder. Of course, isolation, and then comorbid mood disorder, major depressive disorder, social anxiety, and generalized anxiety. Again, this graphic is from Hark. I'm not that good. But we're talking about behaviors and traits, functional deficits, and then leading to animal suffering. So behaviors and traits are things about the person, about what they're struggling with, about who they are constitutionally or what's happened to them with trauma. Functional deficits are things in the environment that don't support the animal's welfare. And if we look at the case in Olancha, behaviors and traits. So I'm going to let you know that I heard this secondhand, and this is from Mark Myers and from Julie Richardson, and I take their word on pretty serious authority. So I'm reporting what they told me, and they were both there. So they were there to see it. As Diana was being led away in handcuffs, she said, "Why am I being arrested? This is my first warning." Now, what we know is that even if you were to look around, and if it was your first warning, you'd see animals that, I'm sure some of you have seen the pictures, maybe you haven't, but the pictures are online. You can't deny that they were suffering. There was a strong smell of alcohol that Julie reported, and she didn't know she was intoxicated, but she could smell alcohol on her. And so Julie used a little bit of motivational interviewing with Diana just to see where she was at. So there were 175 animals there, and so Julie said, "Oh, well, this one's cute," or "Oh, he seems really friendly, like, let's get him adopted." And out of all of the animals, Diana would only agree to letting 2 be adopted out. So she really wanted to hold on to the animals. And she had 35 jennies there and wouldn't give them to anybody unless they would promise to breed them, because she really loved them and she really wanted to spread their genes because they were such good little donkeys. This is not a rescue. She explained the condition of her animals as, well, we had a bad winter. And again, if you have seen the pictures, she's had several bad winters. And she did not have a euthanasia policy. And this is a major problem because the animals went through unnecessary suffering as they were reaching different states of decrepitude. So she would just wait until they died on their own, which, as you can imagine, there are fates worse than death. And she would just take them out to the desert and leave them there after they had passed. So that's not a great way to handle it. And then there was a website that started a new campaign for donations after the arrest. And so I'm guessing that was for her legal fees. But again, she's just trying to get back into the game and not really taking accountability. And I will say, I've not met Ms. Chantos and I'm not diagnosing her, but I think it's fair to say she was not in her right mind. She was not in her right mind to be able to do this. And that's really sad. The functional deficit, so what they found is there were no gates on the pens. So Mark said it almost seemed like there were a bunch of donkeys hanging out and there were panels just put around them because, okay. So no rhyme or reason to where anything was. There was no waste removal. There were no muck rakes. The waste was just piling up, and he said in some of the pens, the donkeys could have walked up over and jumped out of them if they wanted to. There was no castration, and so you're keeping intact males next to the females going through heat. That's creating mental torture, being so close, not being able to get at them. And sometimes they did get at them, and there were unwanted pregnancies. There was no adoption program. No hoof trims, no dental work, no vaccines, no equipment to work the animals for vaccines or trims, even if she was giving them. No tack at all, no lead ropes, halters, muck rakes, but why would you need tack if you don't have any gates on your pens, because they couldn't get out anyway. And insufficient food and water. So the food that they were eating was such poor quality, they were kind of picking through it, and their waste and the food was just becoming kind of a mucky soup. There are different typologies of animal hoarders. And so we'll start with the overwhelmed caregiver. And that could be some of us in this room, and I'll include myself in that. Sometimes when you get so busy and you've got responsibilities, all it takes is one illness or to get knocked down, or you break your leg, or you break your arm and you can't do your ranch chores, and now you can't keep the flow going. And if you can't afford to pay somebody to do your chores, you can have the best of intentions, but you can get into this situation. This is more passive acquisition. These are people that they're kind-hearted and they're good to the animals, and people just end up giving them animals. Like, I've got my 2 donkeys I adopted, but I just, I don't really have time for them anymore. And Eric, you're so good with the animals. Can I just bring them to you? Gosh. And so people find themselves with donkeys on their doorstep and dogs and cats, and these are the people that probably have done this all throughout their life. They're beautiful, kind-hearted people. And they're likely to be socially isolated, so they don't have that partner being like, babe, no more donkeys, we're not doing that. And fewer issues with the authorities. So this classification of people, if a kind-hearted person reaches out to them and says, hey friend, you look like you're in the weeds right now, let's come up with a solution for you. Let me help you, let's find some help. Let's see if we can get these guys adopted out to a home that can love them the way they need to be loved. Usually in this category, people are saying, thank you so much. I want to do good, I just only have so many hours in the day. So that's the overwhelmed caregiver. The rescuer hoarder are more like a formal rescue. So that's active acquisition. They're going out, they're doing the fundraising campaigns, they've got a rescue, they've hung out their shingle. When it gets into the hoarding category, they start to think, just like Diana, I'm the only one that can treat these animals right. So not wanting to adopt them out, not wanting to use euthanasia because the poor babies, they don't deserve that. And they might have a network of people that are kind of going along with them because they want to join and be a rescuer as well. It looks like Diana had slid over into that category, where she just really was hanging on tightly and not open to any type of suggestion or intervention. And then the last category is the exploiter hoarder. And There's some controversy whether this really belongs in the category, and I think as we continue to evolve with this information, they might be kind of parceled out because they're more sociopathic, and they're using the animals for their own benefit, not really to help animals. So they're using them to make money in some way. And you don't teach a sociopath empathy. So this is kind of makes them a better sociopath. So this is not really in the same category, it's true. Out of the typologies, 40% overwhelmed caregivers, 20% rescuers, and 40% exploiters. Yeah. When you think that there's around 3,000 cases that are reported annually, doesn't seem like that many 3,000 cases, but then when you think about their multiple animals, it really gets out of hand quickly. And animal suffering is underneath it all. So as you can imagine, different types of hoarding requires a different type of intervention. They talk about carrots and sticks. Carrots is kind of like, come on, come on, come on, and sticks is like, da, 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 da. So the overwhelmed caregiver, we're going to use carrots, right? So they're going to be more receptive to help and downsizing, therapy. This is a good category for therapy. And prosecution might be counterproductive because, again, there's that shame. The rescuer hoarder, that verbal persuasion really isn't going to work with these people, at least at the beginning. And they might be amenable to a scaled down operation of like, let's help you figure out how to make this manageable for the resources you have. And they might be required to have some legal intervention if they're unwilling to downsize. The exploiter hoarder, they could be dangerous to deal with. And so prosecution is probably the only way to go. The 5 freedoms, we've talked about that last night, but when we're looking at what is kind of the criteria for some intervention, we're looking at the 5 freedoms. Freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, pain, injury, or disease, freedom to express normal behavior, and freedom from fear and distress. So when animals don't have this, this is when we're calling in some help. This is where some attention needs to be brought to the situation. I have so much to tell you. My gosh. I have so much to tell you. I'm going to skip over that. So just a little map here of the states that have laws regarding animal abuse. So just May of this year, I'm going to look at the name here. The Animal Cruelty and Violence Intervention Act of 2019. So people convicted of serious animal abuse have to undergo a psychological evaluation and counseling. The kind of downside to that is we don't really have a recommended protocol for counseling, so that's great that they do, but baby steps, right? So it's better than nothing. So the states in green all have some type of comment on animal abuse laws. The states in yellow, they're getting there, and the states in red, there's nothing. So going back to Diana's case, what was done for the animals? When they went out there just to take a look-see, they had to euthanize one burro immediately. She was in such a state of decrepitude that they couldn't morally even leave her in that state. So she was euthanized right there on the spot. They didn't plan to do that. 6 others, a veterinarian determined that they needed to be put down when they came back. All of the burros had dentals done, vaccines, their first round of hoof restoration because they're going to need some work. They're going to need a lot of work. They had microchips, they were wormed, blood work, and they'll be castrated when they become property of PVDR. So just this, getting them kind of up to speed somewhat. The total cost is over $100,000. This is not including the cost to feed them, to house them, the staff that it takes to monitor them and care for them on the daily. It's a tremendous cost. Just to give you a timeline, March 5th is when they initially went out to do the check. March 11th is when Diana was taken into custody and the burros were seized. May 2nd, she pleaded not guilty to all charges, and very recently, September 5th, her lawyer asked for the felony to be reduced to a misdemeanor and was denied. And she has an arraignment coming up on October 8th, which means that something about the case has changed. So they need to kind of redo. I've been following this case, and the animal abuse laws here in California. So for a misdemeanor, each count is up to a year in county jail and up to $20,000. And for a felony is minimum 6 months in jail, maximum 3 years, and up to $20,000 in fines. So if she's convicted of everything she's charged with, that's 27 years in prison, not county jail, but prison, and $180,000, which to me, it really breaks my heart, because if she is convicted with that, she'll be 90 if she lives that long. You know, and this is somebody that really, that spirit of, I got this, like that resonates with me. So I guess I really feel for her that her legacy of animal rescue and animal advocacy is ending in this way. It's just really an unfortunate case. So you want to rescue animals. Okay, so I talked with Mark Myers a lot about what makes you so successful, and like where do you see people kind of running off the reservation here. And he really talked about money. He said, I think about money from the first moment when I open my eyes till I go to sleep at night. I'm always fundraising, because to be able to have all this in motion, you need to have the funding. PVDR has 3,000 donkeys. They've got full-time employees, thousands of volunteers. And because of that, they can meet each animal as an individual. They can really assess what they need and give them what they need. And each donkey that's rescued costs on average $1,000 when you think about the vetting, the microchipping, hoof work, and this is with everything in place. So this is with a system that already they've got drivers on staff. Really makes you think you're getting a bargain when you rescue a donkey from PVDR, because they don't charge that much, not even half that much to adopt a donkey. And the time per animal per day recommended, this is from HARC, is 10 to 15 minutes. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you've got 160 animals like Diana did, that's 26.7 hours of labor per day. There's 24 hours in a day. Even if you had 4 people working 7-hour days, which she didn't, that's still hard work. And then the minimum amount per animal per month, from Mark's numbers that he gave me, it turns out to be about $67. Again, doesn't sound like a lot. And my partner even said, babe, check your math. When I did the 160 animals, it's $10,000, almost $11,000 per month. And when you think about the GoFundMe campaign that they had that raised $14,000 in 44 months, that's not going to cut it. What makes a rescue successful? Funding, we talked about that. Reliable volunteers. Professionals don't work for free, nor should you expect them to. You might have a kind-hearted farrier or veterinarian or friend or behaviorist come and donate their time. That's great, but it's not sustainable. So you have to have professionals that you're going to pay, and volunteers that will commit to a shift a week or 2 shifts a week. The location's important for visitors, adopters, volunteers, and staff. You can't be out in the middle of nowhere. And having a likable front person or people, that's helpful to get the money. Running it like a business. So when we try to get into rescue and we're leading with our heart, which is awesome, we make decisions with our heart, which can get us down that slippery slope, because we need funding, and funding. I'm running over time. Can I keep? Yeah? Okay, so just for funsies, I did a search of donkey rescue on GoFundMe, and I didn't do burro rescue or equine rescue, I just did donkey rescue, and it came up with 383 hits. And if you can see here, Donkey Rescue Ranch, and I try to black it out because I didn't want to shame anybody if they were here, but 0 raised to $50,000, 0 raised to $3,000. A lot of these were rescues that we're trying to get started. GoFundMe is not going to fund your rescue. What can we do? Okay, I don't mean to sound glib, but don't take on more animals than you can properly care for. So if you can treat 2 donkeys really well or 2 dogs really well, then take those 2 dogs. I could say a lot more about that, but I'm not going to. If you see something, say something. we've got friends, family, neighbors that are questionable. If you see something, say something. And it could start off with that very gentle, hey, it seems like you're a little overwhelmed, or let's see if we can get you some help. HARC has published a great guide for speaking to a friend or family member that you fear might have a hoarding disorder, and I highly recommend that you check it out. It gives great practical solutions. You can support legislation. The only way we're going to get this done is if we go to the government level and change the laws. You can organize a community task force. Again, HARC gives great recommendations for starting in your community. And support reputable rescues. So instead of starting your own, sometimes it's great just to get behind an organization that's doing the right thing and push. Future directions, we need primary prevention that's totally unexplored. We need a standard treatment and more education for health professionals, psychologists, because we don't know what we're doing. I mean, we do, we just don't know that we do. And sometimes treating the other disorders, the substance abuse, the depression, the mood disorders, sometimes that can help. And also, I'm wondering, and I'm going to invite you to either email me or contact me on the Whova app of what you've thought of to come up with a solution, and I can post that. But thinking of, since recidivism is 100%, maybe there's some type of ongoing monitoring or way to monitor, just like we do with sex offenders, that they have to check in and we keep kind of a tab on them. So I'm sure there's more solutions there. So I just want to take a moment, and I'm running into Ben's time, and I'm really aware of that. I just want to take a moment of silence for the donkeys, for the animals, and if you want to gently close your eyes or just let them go soft at a point in front of you, I'd like to read this. It's called A Prayer for Animals. Hear our humble prayer, O God, for our friends, the animals, especially for animals who are suffering, for any that are hunted or lost or deserted or frightened or hungry, for all that must be put to death. We entreat for them all thy mercy and pity. And for those who deal with them, we ask a heart of compassion and gentle hands and kindly words. Make us ourselves to be true friends to animals, and so to share the blessings of the merciful. Thank you guys so much.
The nostalgia one. I drift into nostalgia as we look for alfalfa and maybe a tasty wheat or two. And though the hearts are calling and donkey poop is falling, I can't stop thinking of you. I go out walking with my donkey out on the levee, just like we used to do. I'm always walking with my donkey, searching for you.